The Lost World is a novel released in 1912 by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle concerning an expedition to a plateau in the Amazon basin of South America, where prehistoric animals still survive. It was originally published serially in the popular Strand magazine and illustrated by New Zealand-born artist Harry Rowntree during the months of April to November 1912. The character of Professor Challenger was introduced in this book. The novel also describes a war between indigenous people and a vicious tribe of ape-like creatures. Plot summary: Edward Malone, a reporter for the Daily Gazette, asks his news editor, McArdle, for a dangerous and adventurous mission in order to impress the woman he loves, Gladys Hungerton. He is sent to interview the cantankerous Professor Challenger, who has become notorious for claims made about his recent expedition to South America. The professor has been plagued by intrusive reporters and, being a formidable man of great strength, has taken to forcibly ejecting them, despite the resulting police prosecutions. To gain entry, Malone pretends to be an honest inquirer, but is quickly discovered, assaulted and thrown into the street. Although this is witnessed by a policeman, Malone does not press charges as the original deceit was his. Challenger is suitably impressed, and decides to reveal something of his discovery of living dinosaurs in South America. Malone is invited to a scientific gathering that evening at which he volunteers, along with the biologist Professor Summerlee and the Amazon adventurer Lord John Roxton, to travel to South America to investigate the claims. After a long and arduous journey they reach the plateau, but one of the local guides has a score to settle with Roxton and destroys the temporary bridge across a precipice, trapping the explorers on the dinosaurs' plateau, where he expects them to meet their deaths. On the plateau, the explorers encounter 5 iguanodons and are later attacked by pterodactyls, and Roxton finds some blue clay in which he takes a great interest. After numerous encounters with dinosaurs, Challenger, Summerlee, and Roxton are captured by a race of ape men. While in the ape men's village, they discover a tribe of anatomically modern humans inhabiting the other side of the plateau, with whom the ape men are at war. With the help of the expedition's firepower, the Akala conquer the ape men, and insist that the expedition remain on the plateau. With the help from the young prince of the Akala, whom they had saved from the ape men, the expedition discover a tunnel to the outside world, where they join a large rescue party. Upon return to England, they present the reporters, which include pictures and a newspaper report by Malone, but they are disbelieved by the public, until Challenger shows a live pterodactyl as proof, which then escapes into the Atlantic Ocean. At dinner, Roxton reveals that the blue clay contains diamonds, about £200,000 worth, to be split between them. Challenger plans to open a private museum, Summerlee plans to retire and categorize fossils, and Roxton plans to return to the Lost World. Malone returns to his love, Gladys, only to find that she had married solicitor's clerk in his absence. He therefore volunteers to join Roxton's voyage. Characters in the Lost World: Professor Challenger, zoologist; Edward D. Malone, reporter; McArdle, Edward's editor; Professor Summerlee, scientist; Lord John Roxton, adventurer; Gomez, brother to a slave master Roxton killed; Manuel, Gomez's friend; Zambo, South American black guide; Gladys Hungerton, Edward Malone's love interest. Animals featured: non-avian dinosaurs, Iguanodon, Stegosaurus, Allosaurus, Megalosaurus, Apatosaurus. Other extinct reptiles: Pterodactylus, Plesiosaurus, Ichthyosaurus. Other prehistoric animals included mammals: Megaloceros, Glyptodon, Dryopithecus, Pithecanthropus, Toxodon, Smilodon, birds Phorus harcos. Other creatures on the plateau: Ixodes maloney, a species of blood-sucking tick, named after Malone, the first to be bitten by one. Moths. Some large specimens were seen flying around the expedition's campfire. A 50-feet-long black snake was seen by the expedition. Creatures outside the plateau: Jararaca, a highly aggressive venomous snake. Agouti, tapir, film, television and radio adaptations. The Lost World: Wallace Beery as Professor Challenger, Lewis Stone as Lord John Roxton, Lloyd Hughes as Edward Malone, Bessie Love as Paula White, Arthur Hoyt as Professor Summerlee, Alma Bennett as Gladys Hungerford, Bull Montana as Gomez, Jules Cowes as Zambo. The Lost World: John Dixon Carr as narrator. The Lost World with Abraham Zoffair, Ivor Barnard, Lewis Stringer, Cyril Gardner. The Lost World: Claude Rains as Professor Challenger, Michael Rennie as Lord John Roxton, David Hedison as Edward Malone, Jill Street, John as Jennifer Holmes, Richard Hayden as Professor Summerlee, Fernando Lamas as Manuel Gomez, Ray Strickland as David Holmes, Jay Novello as Costa. Dinosaurs: Basil Rathbone as Professor Challenger, Leo Marion as Dr. Summerlee, Peter Fernandez as Edward Malone. The Lost World: Francis de Wolfe as Professor Challenger, Gerald Harper as Lord John Roxton, Kevin McHugh as Edward Malone, Carlton Hobbs as Professor Summerlee. The Lost World: John Rhys Davis as Professor Challenger, Eric McCormack as Edward Malone, Tamara Gorski as Jenny Nielsen, David Warner as Professor Summerlee, Darren Peter Mercer as Jim, Nathaniel Stanford as Malu. Return to the Lost World: John Rhys Davis as Professor Challenger, Eric McCormack as Edward Malone, Tamara Gorski as Jenny Nielsen, David Warner as Professor Summerlee, Darren Peter Mercer as Jim, Nathaniel Stanford as Malu. The Lost World: Linus Roach as narrator, Johnny Briggs as Professor Challenger, Gomez, Clive Hornby as Lord Roxton, Kevin McKidd as Edward Malone, Kenneth Branagh as Professor Summerlee, Kelly MacDonald as Susan Windsor, Ian McKellen as Professor O'Parker, Lucy Brown as Gladys Hungerford, Rudolph Walker as Zambo. The Lost World: Patrick Bergen as Professor Challenger, David Naman as Lord Roxton, Julian Casey as Arthur Malone, Jane Heitmeyer as Amanda White, Michael Sinelnoff as Professor Leo Summerlee, Gregory Ann Minot Payar as Diana, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World: Peter Macaulay as Professor Challenger, William Snow as Lord John, Richard Roxton, David Orth as Edward Ned Malone, Rachel Blakely as Marguerite Crux, Jennifer Odell as Veronica Layton, Michael Sinelnoff as Professor Arthur Summerlee. The Lost World: Bob Hoskins as Professor Challenger, Tom Ward as Lord John, Philip Roxton, Matthew Rees as Edward Malone, Elaine Cassidy as Agnes Clooney, James Fox as Professor Leo Summerlee, Peter Falk as Reverend Theo Kerr. King of the Lost World: Bruce Boxleitner as LT Challenger, Rhett Giles as Lord Roxton, Jeff Denton as Edward Malone, Sarah Leaving as Rita Summerlee. The Lost World: David Robb as Professor Challenger, Jamie Glover as Lord John Roxton, Jonathan Forbes as Edward Malone, Jasmine Hyde as Dr. Diana Summerlee, Jane Whittenshaw as Edith Challenger, Nyasha Hatendi as Maple White, Vanikia Salas as Quirios.